180, that's the prosecutor's office, department number 180. And 185 is child support.
So, I guess I'll start by saying thank you for the opportunity. I know that it was, I know that it's a lot, it's a busy time, and yesterday I don't think it was contemplated, but for allowing time to come and address some of these issues, I appreciate it. I want to start by being clear, and I think I was, I thought I was, and I hope I was, with my written response, although it wasn't, it was a short timeline to work with, and it wasn't entirely clear to me how to respond with, in terms of numbers. But yesterday, I sort of felt at the beginning of yesterday's meeting that my office was lumped in with one or two others in the category of, we just said, no, we're not, we refuse. And in a sense, I can understand that, but the reality of my response, at least what I meant to convey was, so the meeting prior, I had asked the question, a clarifying question. It's my understanding, what I'm hearing is, we're gonna get numbers from Frank, and that's gonna show potential suggested budget reductions, and if we didn't like those, then we could find somewhere else to reduce, but ultimately, that was our number. And the answer was, I think, yes, if I understood. And what I ended up finding out was our number then, under that reasoning, was $100,910. That $100,910 included about $12,000, give or take, dollars of cuts to the child support enforcement program or department, which I guess about which I'd say two things. Number one, you know, the state approves that budget and has approved that budget, and they give us the money on a dollar for dollar reimbursement for every dollar that's spent out of that budget. And so, respectfully, I mean that, you know, I don't think that that's money that the commissioners should be looking at cutting. But beyond that, even if you did, all that means for every dollar that's cut out of that expenditure department is a dollar of revenue that won't be realized. So it's a net zero effect to current expense.
And we appreciate
Yeah.
that explanation. I think neither of us were aware of that.
Right.
Yeah,
Unless you
well,
were.
I was after the fact, not
Right.
before.
Right.
Yeah, and
So-
after the fact, and like I said, even Frank said, you know,
Yeah.
that's why he sent it out that way.
Right.
He doesn't know, but after he knew, he said, yeah,
Right.
no.
Yeah.
So-
And again, if I may, just for a moment
Sure.
to interject, the analysis was purely in consideration of an account by account, line by line,
Right.
not even under looking at which department specifically that was or was within. It was a mathematical exercise to say,
Right.
where could dollars be found? And that's why the recourse was then requested to say, and what say you, in
Right.
regards to
Exactly.
And what that said, that's gotten us pretty close
Right.
so far, but it's not perfect.
So the trouble with me, for my office, is if it's not gonna be an FTE, and it's not gonna come out of child support, that means, and assuming that's my number, that $101,000 amounts to about 60% of my operating budget, which I can't cut. I can't cut that much. And so my response was intended to convey, in order to come anywhere near that number, it has to be an FTE, it has to be an attorney FTE. I indicated which line, and I think I even highlighted them, that I would, and I didn't have the ability, shame on me, but Darcy was gone on vacation, and I didn't have the ability, I didn't have the ability to quickly pull out the benefits that could be reduced that would correspond to losing that position, so it would be a little more than obviously just a salary.
But again, we were hoping not to have it.
Oh, I understand.
So that's,
But my desire would be, the reason I responded that way was, since the only way I can come even close is with a position. If I'm going to lose a position, then I'd rather not lose those operating costs. And I've done my best in a short time frame to go through and look at the different proposed, and believe me, I don't have the capacity, at least on this short timeframe, the way some do with numbers, probably Darcy and Frank included among those that can do it, to have a very good track of what departments requested, what was proposed to be taken out, and then what they added back in, and to be able to have an understanding of what the final number is. But I did go look at what was proposed to be taken out, and almost all of the departments that had significant reductions, most of the reduction was proposed new FTEs that weren't authorized, which meant the net reduction, so
I agree with you.
it,
I know that.
when we don't have any new positions, that full $101,000 is existing status quo operating that would be gone, or an FTE. Whereas, I made myself a little chart, but I won't go through all the numbers, because frankly, I'm not super satisfied that I understand it well enough. I took, out of each of the worksheets, I took the new positions that were added in that then were taken out, and then tried to identify the benefits that would correspond to them and get a rough idea of how much of their actual reduction was reduction from status quo versus just not granting new positions. And if you look at it that way, that number slams us harder than anybody. Because we didn't have any new stuff, new people, new toys, new operating. And believe me, I'm not intending at all to comment on the validity of any of those requests. I mean, I'm sure every department has good arguments for why they need the new people, including district court that we just heard from. I'm not saying that they don't have great arguments for why they're getting them. I'm just trying to look at it from the standpoint of how much of the department by department reductions are reductions from status quo versus not granting what's new stuff that's been requested.
I understand what you're saying.
So, I mean, having said that, I stand by my earlier response. I think the only way, if there's going to be a significant reduction like that, the only way my office could sustain it, could absorb it and continue to operate would be to eliminate a Deputy 2 position. And there are two that I have, one of which is, and I think of it maybe the way not everybody does, and so perhaps if there's other questions, Darcy could explain it, or could answer them. One Deputy 2 position, the full salary and benefits is in my prosecutor department, my main prosecutor budget. The other Deputy 2 position, which is budgeted at the same salary, and so same corresponding benefits, is actually half in my regular prosecutor budget, which is 180, and half in the mental health therapeutic court division department, whatever we call it, which is 180.164 program. So whichever one of those, however you think about it, and that's, I think, was the confusion, Commissioner, yesterday when you were hearing me say half of a position. The one that I would be likely to cut would be the most recently added, which is the one that the full FTE lives half on the prosecutor side and half on the mental health side, therapeutic court side. But either way, the dollar amount wouldn't be different. Those two positions are funded the same, or budgeted the same.
Were you able to go through and find any other cuts other than the staff?
We did.
And that's the stuff I'd be, to be honest with you, I have no desire to think that we're gonna cut 100,000 out of your budget.
Yeah.
I just, I went over it in my head over and over again, especially the last 2 days of last night, and I was aware of myself, for the longest time, we haven't been adding a bunch of people there, and that's where a lot of these cuts are. We're doing a little different. In my head, how I would do it is I'd go to the status quo and then see about cutting from that point. We're going with a full add, the cutting backwards. It's a style difference.
Right.
I have to learn how to do it that way because I'm not the budget manager. So I'll learn and I'll deal with it.
So recognizing that, and I still think, I hear,
Can we add a bunch of stuff there?
yeah. Well, and a lot of the stuff, and I know I explained this, I don't think, unless you have questions, I don't need to go through it all again, but a lot of the stuff that hasn't been expended yet is because it comes due at the end of the year. Bar dues, our
And that was the
case
formula we were
management
using,
payment,
and
all
so
that
that's why
stuff. Right.
they would pop up.
Right.
Well, I guess I'm curious about some of these that are totally zeroed out.
Okay.
Case management.
We get the bill in November, which we haven't
got it up
received
and running
yet.
at the end of
Is that
last
child
year.
support?
I'm sorry.
Is that child support?
No, that's
No,
our
that's
new,
software.
Oh, that's your
Prosecutor
software.
case
And we
management.
actually, we reduced that back by 50.
That was
Because we had to
$65,000.
purchase the whole thing and
which-
then we reduced it down,
Purchase now.
yeah.
It used to be 65,000, which was for the acquisition and training and everything. Now we're just to the annual maintenance and user license bill, which, since we went live in November of 2015, and we paid the pro rata portion of it, we'll get another bill this month for a year's worth of, which, you know, we need the $15,000 to cover that annual bill. It just doesn't come until November,
Okay, yeah,
because that's when we, that's just a function of when we went live.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And then child support admin costs, there's like 29,000
So,
Mhm.
that was budgeted, but we're at zero.
right.
Is that a once-a-year thing as well?
No, that is the money that we receive for administering the child support program within our office. So it allows us the ability to spend it before we give it to the general fund, if that makes sense. But we also get a portion for you guys, which I was able to pull the numbers. So the indirect cost amount that the county receives from us running that program has been $11,380 for this year to date. Next year, I have it budgeted at about 19, because we did the benefits a little bit different this year. When I was working with my child support gal, we were able to actually figure out how to, they used to estimate the benefits, and we were able to, if I actually send the hours with the benefits worked out, to get a larger reimbursement back, which is why next year the number is 35.
And that's the indirect cost, right? Or is
Well,
it?
their number, the indirect cost that would go into the general fund is gonna be 19 next year. But this year, we've already brought in 13,000 on your guys's. So next year, when we get that 35, it's up where there's the revenue, there's the exact revenue
Right.
coming in. So typically what happens is we have the money to run the program.
That is, is there a revenue line around here?
No, this is just.
Yeah, it's up top, it's up top.
Well,
Was it?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, maybe
Yeah,
not, it
all
wasn't.
these
The first
Oh,
line
yeah,
is the
yeah.
23,000.
So, well, it's the 23
That number
plus
plus that.
the 11.
There's revenue coming in
So
that
those
equals
two
that
should add to that.
35,090.
So
So,
all it does is allow us the ability to spend it before we
if needed.
return.
So every month we bill, we submit every month, right? We submit for reimbursement from the state. That is a $1 for $1 reimbursement for salaries, benefits, equipment, whatever gets paid out of that department. And on top of that, there's a percentage that comes straight to the county as indirect costs and to us for administrative costs. And what that line does is give us the ability to spend it before it just rolls into the end, but we don't very often spend it. And so what we looked at was, and I think Darcy made some calls this morning to confirm that we can, if, I mean, we could reduce that by, we think 20 to 25,000. As far as the budget authority to spend. That will still realize the revenue. I mean, we'll still do the billing and we'll still be getting the direct administrative costs. We just won't be giving ourselves authority to spend as much of it. But we'd like to maintain, you know, at least 10,000 in that line for stuff that,
And you would
That
absorb
we
the rest
might
of it
need.
as what you normally would have done through the regular.
So I called to
Or
make
it
sure
like
that we could
just
use it
increase
for
expenditure
any,
authority and increase revenue.
what we're talking about is not reducing the revenue, just reducing the expenditure authority,
Yeah,
which
so
would
the
then
rest
have a
of-
net reduction of, say, $25,000 on our operating side. Of money that you can see, it's difficult to,
A net positive in their budget of $25,000, right, which is the same as the $25,000 cap.
right.
rather than reducing other places, basically that money would still come in and to keep our other lines where they are, but we would reduce that.
Because the reality is that's what it's normally done, is it's to offset the operating costs of doing child support. The cost that the operating child support enforcement imposes on the rest of the administration of the office. Paper, copies, faxes, whatever. And so it's historically, since it was put in, there was a time when the revenue was coming in, but we had no expenditure line. That was put in years ago to at least give us the ability to spend it if we needed to.
Where the positive would.
But then, when it's there, it typically doesn't have much, if any, spent out of it. It really is there to float, historically has been there to float other lines that ran negative. But we're, you know, if you'll remember, a couple of years ago, we already used that money to kind of get those lines to where they weren't
So
routinely
we would
running
reduce
negative.
that one rather than, the only other way to do it would be to do a worksheet where we try to reduce all kinds of
It's
things
still
and
a cut.
then add the money.
It works for me, I understand it
But
completely.
basically, she said today when I
That's
talked
too
to her.
convoluted.
Well, you know, I wanted to be real clear because 4D money is really tricky.
They're
And it's
really
from state and fed, so I
picky
wanted to
about
be really
that.
sure that with that line item in our budget, we've always kind of treated it like if there's any child support admin costs that go above and beyond, or there's anything that department needs, or that that's what it's there for. But, so when I called her today, I wanted to make real sure that it could really just offset some of the costs of running our office because of us having it. They use our copier sometimes, they use our paper sometimes, and she said that that was fine. You can't do it within the 185 at all. But that's why, so our 185 budget is like 260, roughly off the top of my head. But
The
our,
child support one.
yeah, but our actual approved budget for next year is the 317, which is where I get the 20,000 roughly that the county would get, where I get the 35,000 that we would get, and then we would get exactly what they need to run
I got you.
there. So the easiest thing would just be
Did
to
you
take
have
that down
any
and
other
use that
ones?
money.
Did you find the other cuts?
No. I mean, not
Well,
that,
that's a pretty good,
That's
a pretty good
here,
cut.
I wanna
with
be
not
clear,
increasing,
I understand,
I know that.
I understand the
It's tough.
commissioner's question, and I wanna say it this way. The first thing I did was go through looking at what I thought we could survive cutting. And it wasn't 25,000, it was less than that. But leaving that 35,000 and 90, which there's revenue for, as the ability to float some of those lines. And it was actually Darcy who made the calls and did the work and had the idea that we actually can probably cut more by reducing that admin cost line by 25,000, but by doing that, not artificially reduce some of the other
No, can I
operating
tell you how I saw it? I see what you're doing,
Yeah.
this is how I envision what you're doing.
Yeah.
You have a little here, a little here, a little here, a little here. You can try and do this one, and just make sure that it gets done by doing it this way. And anything that comes into that you need, that goes over what you have in there, you'll absorb those little bits of jab.
yes,
So you found a way to get 25 grand
Right.
hard money out of the bottom line.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah, well, because also with
I think that's fine.
some of it coming out of mental health, like there was some stuff deducted from mental health too that doesn't really help us that much because if we spend money out of there, it makes more sense to have it in there.
Well,
You know, like-
actually, that's
like
another,
there's small
that's another
little
good question.
things in there.
Is there any possibility of any of the stuff that you have in here that could expend more mental health money?
Well, some of the cuts that were proposed were to that.
No, I know, I
Mental health money
understand,
too.
but we're not even looking at.
I
any of this
understand.
one. Is there anything else that you see as a possibility to bring in more mental health money to offset any other stuff?
Not in the time frame that we had, and unfortunately with being gone, I didn't see it until yesterday. But this was the fastest, clearest way I could find without touching 185, because we can't do it, without really touching mental health, because it doesn't make sense to take away the money that they would spend, or the very little amount in the legal services if we get a lawsuit or something. This was the biggest bulk chunk that I could find that would help. I mean, it's only a quarter of what was asked of us, but I felt like that was pretty good since we were,
Well, and, that's why I did this exercise.
more than other people have been asked.
I know it's not, I know it doesn't solve the problem. I mean,
No.
our $25,000 doesn't balance the budget. But when you take out the new money that's reduced and look at just the reductions from status quo, I mean, our 25 is compared to 5,000, 4,000, 17,000, 10,000, 33,000. I mean, it's kind of in line, I feel like, with how it's hitting everybody else. Except for the sheriff, which is, it's a much bigger number, but it's out of a much, much bigger number, so.
May I come in?
Please.
I want to say personally, I appreciate this because I do, like I said, I've actually been thinking about your budget in particular. I thought about it a lot last night, tried to go over it in my head and the different aspects of it. And I've also gone over the last several years. And the truth of the matter is, you haven't. You know, there hasn't been a lot of taking of extra stuff that's been put on. So there wasn't much that could be, you know, taken away. And I thought about all these little different pieces, but I know that we've had this discussion before, we had a hard time. And we were talking nickels and dimes, we were trying to find at the time. It's kind of like what we would have had to have done here, but we found a different way to handle it, and then you'll find it as you go. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I just want you to know, I think you did a wonderful job, and for what it is that you have worked with in your budget, I can't say that this is gonna be good enough for us, I'm not saying that, you know, we have the whole picture we have to look
Yeah,
at. But I
absolutely.
do wanna say at this point, I definitely appreciate it,
And I want to say too, there's two things I want to say before we're done, and if there's more questions, I'm happy to say as long as the commissioners want. I don't know how much time I have. One of the things I want to make sure I say is, I understand, I've said forever, before I was elected, and certainly ever since, every year when this time comes, I have an obligation to tell you what I need. Your job is to tell me what I'm gonna get. And I respect that. I know, ultimately, we're gonna have to live within what we're told we need to live within. I just need you to know that if we're talking about much more than that 25,000, the only way I can get there is with a position. I just can't find enough to make a big enough dent anywhere else. But the other thing I wanna make sure I said today, I thought it was interesting that used the example, Commissioner Ireland, to Judge Meadows, because I can't remember if or when the last time it was that we would have talked about it. I know that I've had a conversation with Commissioner Jeffries about it. I meet with the law enforcement leads, which is the sheriff, the chief of police, the state patrol lieutenant, the tribal chiefs, both of them, the last Thursday of every month, just to talk about criminal justice type issues and needs and things they need to know and things I need to know. And I've sort of been dominating those meetings the last 3 or 4 or 5 months with my hope of starting a program that would allow us to divert pre-charge the driving while license suspended third cases. Now, I have not kept the commissioners very well informed with what that plan is because frankly, I'm not positive that we'll be able to do it yet until recently, and I'm still not positive now.
Because you have one party that's pushing back.
Well, I think I've solved those problems. We are in the process of applying for sector user licenses. Sector is the computer system that the police officers use to submit their tickets straight to district court. They don't have the option of referring them to me through sector because we don't have sector. It's free. It requires me to apply for it and get trained on it, to get my staff trained on it, but it doesn't cost anything to have. Once we have sector privileges, all the law enforcement officers in the agency, in the area, will be able to, instead of direct filing with the court, refer directly to my office. Now, they can still direct file all other kinds of crimes, but when it comes to the driving while license suspended third degree, and this is the other interesting thing I learned, there is a statute that was passed about 2, maybe 3 sessions ago that allows me to require those cases to be referred to me and not filed with court. But that's why I've been working so hard to meet with all the law enforcement leads on it, because unless I have their buy-in, there's no way I can see to enforce that. What do I do if they say no, right? But I did recently learn in applying for sector privileges that for those cases, because of that law, the computer, if I ask them to, can actually limit their options so that they only have the option of sending it to me. And it simplifies it for the officers in the field because they don't have to go back to their desk and write a report and send it over. They can just still use sector like they're used to doing for those.
Yeah.
So, my plan all along was to utilize that half and half deputy 2 that I talked about to monitor and manage, because that's an extra load for me, for my office. Those cases come to me instead of going to the court first. And even if it is only 3 hours a week in district court, like the judge said, that's 156 hours a year of judge time, clerk time, etc.
But it also, does it lighten their administrative load over at district court as well, if they're not being filed?
Oh yeah, I think so. And some will still be filed, but Spokane City, if you look at the City of Spokane Prosecutor's Office on their website, they have a PowerPoint that I actually downloaded and submitted to the different law enforcement officers. I can send it to you if you want, but it was easy to find on the City of Spokane, because they have a really good program. What's that?
Under whose department?
The prosecutor, city prosecutor. And I actually called to try to get a hold of somebody, and the number I called was on the PowerPoint, and it takes you right to the driver's relicensing program and tells you when to report and all that. So that wasn't what I was looking for, so I had to find their actual office number and talk to the prosecutor who's in charge of their department. But, they charge a fee. And I don't know that we would charge as much as they do, because I don't know that we can offer the same level of services that they do, but there's gonna be some costs associated with monitoring it. So it not only has the potential to reduce, potentially, public defender caseload time and district court time, but it also has the possibility of generating a little bit of revenue, not to mention all of the district court and municipal court fines locally and around the state that people have to pay off in order to get relicensed, which, you know, the Spokane PowerPoint has a pretty good capture of how much they brought in fees, and also how much in just, how many dollars in fines have been paid off, collected as a result of their program. So it's something that I'm shooting for, but I really got cold feet when it looked like I may have to lose that attorney position, because I don't know that that's work that I can absorb without that body. So I brought it up last because it's not, I don't want it to look like,
You're using it as a tool.
I really don't. I mean, I did everything else first because I don't want it to be that way, but, you know, that's all I could think about in the back when you were asking Judge Meadows about programmatic changes that might have might lessen the burden on other areas of the system. So that's what I'm working on, and I've been hopeful that we can start as early as January 1, but the closer it gets to that, the more nervous I get about that being a start date.
Did I catch your question correctly?
Yes, you did, very good.
I think so.
But the truth is you need to still hire this position, is that correct?
The truth is I have resumes that I'm reviewing that I haven't started interviewing yet until
So January 1 is definitely a possibility.
January 1's a possibility, yeah. I technically, yes and no. I mean, the position that I would use for it is filled. It's the other deputy 2 position that's not filled.
Okay.
But if I were going to lose one, I would be moving her into the one that I want to keep and then cutting the one that she's in.
It's a program right away. Okay.
Well, again,
Yeah.
it would make it a lot harder to justify taking it on. And I don't know what the revenue would be. I figure,
I think the cost savings.
right. It's not gonna pay for itself.
I
It's
don't
not
think
gonna be
it's a
a,
revenue generator, nor is it, we've got to lighten the caseload
Right.
over in public defense, we just have to do it.
and that's, right. And I had a long conversation with Peter Jones about it the other day. It was eye-opening because he seemed shocked by that plan and that it was far enough along to be actually having that specificity of it. And he asked me, his question was, does Susan know about that? And I said, yeah, I talked to her several times about that plan, and
Didn't
apparently
go
that
down.
wasn't being relayed around the office because they were surprised, but it was a good conversation because they would welcome it also, I guess is what I say.
I think so too.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we are. I'm happy to answer any question. There's nothing, nothing secret or that I would take personal out of anything. It's just we look at it and go, okay, if we're going to cut it out of operating, we think we could.
And your travel, the reduction proposed for travel is not understanding that the travel happens at the end of the year.
Well, still upcoming,
Did you not project that out?
it's a little bit funny because a portion of it ends up getting offset by WAPA. Because they send us some money back, which goes, so unfortunately it goes back in there. But also what you're seeing is half. So what we used to do, I hate saying that because apparently it was wrong, but what we did for years was Darcy would pay for next year's conference this year.
Well, I don't think we had to hold the rooms.
Right, we have to.
Chelan will take them because it's so full.
Is that
So
early in the year conference then?
it's in June.
But they send you you have to rebook when you leave.
Right.
And so now
It's
what we have
packed.
to do is pay for one night for the,
Which one?
it's the.
Campbell's.
Oh, it's gotta be Campbell's, isn't it?
So what it used to be is we would,
And the staff training.
when we got when we needed to make the reservations, we would just pay for all of it. And then it was,
Only once a year though.
right, once a
I mean,
year.
I don't want that to be, we only paid out of one budget cycle, we just were a year ahead. So
Right.
we would make the reservations this year and pay for
So every year was paid
We only
out of the
were
year before.
charging 1 year.
And then that was brought to our attention that we shouldn't, or at least from now on,
Well,
can't do that,
We
right?
needed to split it.
So, but we still have to pay, so it's 2 nights for the attorneys. We still have to pay 1 night this year because we have to pay the deposit, a minimum of 1 night to get the reservation.
So that's what that's representing.
And then we pay the other half of it in the first half of next year. So it still ends up being paid once a year. It's just paid half out of one and half out of the other instead of being paid ahead.
And
So,
there's
so we're about to hit the other half of that before the end of the year.
Well, there's
What you're
the-
seeing is,
The winter conference, which is the
Right.
the big one there.
what you're seeing spent out of there is the second half for this last June.
Programmatically, do you just not have any cases on the days that you know, not schedule, somehow or another, not get any cases scheduled where the entire staff goes to one of these
The
conferences?
entire staff doesn't go.
Oh, okay.
Most of the felony prosecutors go to the criminal training track in Chelan. The district court attorneys go, there's a separate WAPA, Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, training conference for the district court attorneys that's at a different time. There's one for the juvenile court attorneys that's at a different time. So we're never all gone at the same
I'm sorry,
time.
we have a support staff one as well, that's
Right.
a support staff from the prosecutor's office. So we used to pay for that and the prosecutors
Right.
a year ahead in case, you know, we were always just paying for one time, but we always paid for that. I always make the reservations at the end of the year and pay for them for the 6 months down the road or whatever, because when you book the room, you would have to book them. So now I have to pay for one night, 16, one night, 17.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let us know if you have any other questions if they come up. Or, you know, if there's any other direction.
Keep us informed on the sector.
Sector is the name of the program. Once we get set up on that, that'll go a long ways towards the next step. And we should be able to be on that by January 1. I don't know whether we'll have the rest of the framework. But I'm hopeful that we will. I'm not giving up on that.